Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Erin, and if you've not viewed any of my videos before, then I'm mum to 8-month-old baby girl called Pippa. And in today's video I wanted to share with you my experience of feeding Pippa, both breastfeeding and bottle feeding, because I don't know about you, but when I had given birth, like aside from the whole labour thing, the one thing that I stressed about the most was feeding. So this video is really just my experience, it's my kind of truth about it. I am not a qualified person in how to feed your baby, but I think it's really helpful for mums just to share their experience, and hopefully you can maybe relate to some of this stuff, or it might help you if you're having a baby and thinking about how you want to feed your baby. So for me, I guess I was quite lucky in the sense that I was never massively kind of bothered about breastfeeding. So when I was pregnant, I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go and see how it works, and if I find it okay, and if I do, then I'm going to stick with it. But I didn't put a huge amount of pressure on myself. So I didn't read up on loads of stuff around breastfeeding. I went to what we've got in England, it's like an NCT class on breastfeeding to learn a little bit about it. But I didn't know kind of loads about breastfeeding. So after I'd given birth, probably about 30 minutes after I'd given birth, Pippa was kind of on me, and she just started to kind of like try and latch on, which I'd seen videos of babies doing this and thought, does that really happen? But it did with her. So she just kind of found the nipple, latched on instantly, and I started feeding her, and I thought, oh well, this is okay, like this is absolutely fine, it didn't hurt. She found the latch really well, and so instantly I just started breastfeeding. And my experience of breastfeeding at the start was that it was really quite easy. It was comforting for her, it was quite comforting for me, and I enjoyed it. So after the first couple of weeks of breastfeeding, I did start to find it quite difficult. So for me, Pippa was quite a slow feeder, and sometimes she would be feeding on me for kind of like 2 hours plus. And in hindsight, I don't know whether that was just for comfort or whether she was kind of still getting milk from me. But there was something about it that I just found absolutely exhausting, and I couldn't really do anything. Obviously, you can't kind of leave them for any prolonged period of time, because if they need fed, then you want to be there. And at a few weeks old, you don't really want to leave your baby. But I started to find it really, really tough, and kind of being the one to get up in all the nights and doing all the night feeds, and the sheer kind of exhaustion of breastfeeding was difficult. So at the kind of 6-week mark, we started to introduce the little Aptamil bottles, and she would have one of those at night. So Dan, my husband, would feed her one of those at night at around 6 weeks, and that was really good. I mean, I panicked thinking she wasn't going to take it, but actually he had a little, when he was feeding her, he'd have a little muslin that had my kind of perfume and scent on it, and that seemed to help her, and she would guzzle the bottle. It would literally be gone in like 2 minutes. So she obviously enjoyed that. She wasn't fussy. I know some babies can be, but she wasn't fussy at all. So at 6 weeks we introduced that, and then from about the 2.5-month mark, I wanted to try combination feeding. Again, Pippa was still being really kind of long in her feeds, and I was starting to really struggle a bit with that. So we introduced combination feeding, where we would give her another bottle during the day and then a bottle for her nighttime feed. And again, that worked well for us, but for one reason or another, you know, obviously my breasts were used to producing a certain amount of milk, and when I went onto the combination feeding, I did end up with mastitis. So that was at around the 3-month mark, and I have to admit, for anyone who's had mastitis before, or I'm sure you've possibly heard of it, it was horrible. It was really painful when she was feeding, and even when she wasn't feeding, the pain was just kind of unbearable. So at the 3-month mark, I decided to stop breastfeeding and move on to kind of fully bottle feeding. I think that decision was maybe, as I said, easier for me, because I was never really focused on breastfeeding. I thought, you know what, I've fed her for 3 months and I've given it a good go. The mastitis was just a bit too much for me, and I thought, actually, I'm quite happy at this stage to move to bottle feeding. So we moved her to bottles, and she was really quite happy with that, and that's where we've been ever since. So obviously kind of Dan can give her a feed, and that works quite well, and now we're in a stage where she's in a pretty good routine. So if you're breastfeeding, some of the things that I would recommend you buy are some really good nursing bras. So this one is from Marks and Spencer's. They sell a huge variety, but they just unclip at the top and they're really easy for you to breastfeed with. So definitely invest in a couple of those. This lanolin cream is amazing. It's nipple cream, and I put it on every time, kind of after I fed Pippa, just constantly, even if my breasts weren't sore, and it just meant that they stayed kind of nice and cool and soft, and I didn't have any cracked nipples, so I definitely recommend that. And then finally, obviously the cabbage leaves in your bra if you do have sore breasts, or if you have mastitis. It's just so soothing and cooling and really takes away the pain, so that is amazing as well. And if you're bottle feeding, I would recommend 4 pieces of equipment. So first you'll need a steriliser. I got the Tommy Tippy one that goes in the microwave. It's amazing. You can put 5 bottles in at a time, put a little bit of water underneath it and pop it in the microwave for about 7-8 minutes, and all the bottles are sterilised and it lasts for ages. I've had this since Pippa was born. The second piece of equipment is a Tommy Tippy prep machine. You will have probably heard people talk about this. It is a lifesaver. Use it if you're bottle feeding, and it just makes sure that the bottle is always at the perfect temperature for your baby and ready within kind of 2 minutes, so they will never go hungry. And then finally, some Tommy Tippy bottles. So you can get packs of 4, packs of 6, but I find them hard wearing, and also Pippa really likes the teat on them, so she's fed from them quite easily from the start. And finally, this little powder container, I just got in Tesco for a couple of pounds, and it's been brilliant. It means that I can take it out with me, make sure that I've got powder ready so that I can just pop it in the bottles. So after the 3-month mark, when Pippa was fully bottle fed from formula, it was a weird one, because in myself I didn't feel guilty about not breastfeeding or anything like that, but when I was out with people, for some reason I felt like I had to justify myself and say, you know, oh, I was breastfeeding and then I got mastitis and then I stopped, and I think it was me putting pressure on myself doing that. I really don't think it was anyone else judging me or thinking that I should breastfeed. But really, when you listen to the news or the radio, there's so much about feeding your baby, and I think people can definitely feel pressured to breastfeed. And for one reason or another, it just doesn't either happen for people or they don't want to do it. And if there's anything I've learned from having Pippa and the whole feeding thing, it's just as long as your baby's getting fed, it really doesn't matter. You need to do what's right for you. You want to be healthy in yourself, and if that means you breastfeed, then great. If that means you bottle feed, then great. I hope you've found this video useful. I know that breastfeeding and bottle feeding can be a bit of a kind of touchy subject, and people have quite strong opinions on it, but I really just wanted to share my experience with you and some of the lessons I've learned along the way around breastfeeding and bottle feeding. I hope this has been helpful. I'd love to hear about your feeding experience, so please leave me any comments in the comments box below.